Welcome to Complete Car, and it's time for a language lesson because Volante is the Italian for flying, but it's also the word that Aston Martin has used for all of its convertible models right the way back to 1965, and this DB12 Volante is the latest in that, let's face it, illustrious line. I mean, do you really need me to tell you how gorgeous a car this is? Because it's pretty stunning, isn't it? Not everybody's going to go for this pale blue, but I think it looks absolutely amazing. This gaping grille down the front looks fantastic, feeding all the air to that mighty engine, which we'll come on to more in a minute. I mean, underneath, this is still very, very similar to the old DB11. It uses much of the same platform, so you've got very similar extruded aluminium sections that are then bonded and riveted together, and it's very light and very strong, and indeed very, very stiff, which is just as well because, as you can see, this one's missing its roof. It's got quite a clever roof, actually. It folds in what Aston Martin calls a K formation, and that allows it to have a very shallow stack here at the back under the tonneau cover, which means you get a nice clean line. Aston actually says that at 260 millimeters, it's the slimmest roof of any of its comparable rivals. Now, I did mention the engine. A bit unusually, even though this car is called DB12, it's actually an 8. That's a V8 under there. It's a Mercedes AMG V8, or at least an engine derived from Mercedes AMG. Of course, Mercedes has a long history with Aston Martin in the past few years. It's invested in the company. The companies are partners. So that is the 4-litre twin-turbo V8 that's very, very familiar from many other Mercedes AMG models. And here, it develops a fairly colossal 680 horsepower. Even though this is only rear-wheel drive, it'll hit 100 kilometers an hour in 3.7 seconds. This is a spectacularly quick car. But there's more to it than just this delectable outside. There's more to it than just that remarkable engine. There's also a new interior to take a look at, so we should probably go and do just that. So as has been Aston Martin tradition for the last couple of decades, you get these dihedral angle doors that sort of swing out and up and then close down and in. But the rest of the interior is very, very new. This is a big, big step up for the inside of the old DB11, which always just felt a bit cheap and a bit plasticky, certainly by the standards of what you would expect from an Aston Martin. This is a big, big improvement, I have to say. Everything is arranged here on this big sweeping center console. Aston Martin makes most of its own switchgear now, and even though there is a big and fairly impressive new screen, the company says that it wants to stick with tactility. It wants to create buttons that you can touch and feel and use, and that is only for the good. It is so much nicer to use this big clunky control to control the engine management modes and the driving modes than it is to go hunting around for a menu on a screen. Overall quality is really, really beautiful. It's quite a plain cabin. It's not over-styled. I'm not sure how well that'll go down with some buyers. Maybe for the money that Aston wants for this car, they might be looking for a bit more drama. And also, it is a bit obvious that this steering wheel has been pinched from a Mercedes. It does look quite similar to what you get in some much more affordable and much more humble cars, but it just about gets away with it. Now, it is a 4-seater just. This is the 2+2. I wouldn't try putting anybody you like very much back there, but you can just about squeeze some people in the back. You can get the kids in, you can squeeze in some adults for some very, very short journeys if you like. It is, you know, for much that Aston Martin tries to claim that this is a supercar mixed with a Grand Tourer, it still feels like a Grand Tourer in here. It feels comfortable, it feels relaxed, it feels cosseting. But is that how it's going to feel out on the road? Well, I think it's about time we headed out and found out. I'd like to point out we have actually had the roof down pretty much all afternoon. It is a bit grey today, but the DB12 Volante is well equipped in terms of airflow management. As long as you're driving with these side windows up, it's actually all pretty calm and surprisingly well refined here inside the cockpit. I've only put the roof up now just to try it out, and also so that I can speak and so that my microphone isn't being overwhelmed by rushing wind noise. So, what is the DB12 Volante actually like to drive? Well, you'll not be surprised to hear it's pretty wonderful. I mean, I'm sure there will be a chorus of voices shouting out, for the money, it sure as hell should be, but it is. I mean, obviously, it is a stunningly beautiful car. I think the interior, maybe not quite as stunning. I'm kind of warming to it a bit more in that it's very simple and very pleasantly laid out. All of your controls are here on the center console or here on the steering wheel. The touchscreen is good. I'm starting to like the fact that the rest of the interior isn't too over the top or too over styled. It's just actually quite nice and simple, and the quality does seem to be very, very good. I think the only thing that's a letdown is the digital screen in front of the driver. Not that it's not good, but just that it's another digital screen, and I think it would be nice if a brand like Aston Martin could maybe do some analog dials as well as digital displays. I think that might be a slightly nicer touch. In terms of the engine, I think what's most surprising about it is just how quiet and refined it is most of the time. I mean, there is an adjustable sports exhaust system, so when you want maximum loudness, you can have it. When you want a bit of gentle discretion, you can have that too. There's no doubting the power. I mean, when you uncork this thing, 680 horsepower is a lot of horsepower by anybody's standards. And big car though this is, and it is quite a wide car, and it does feel that on tight roads like we're driving today in the Cotswolds of the UK, by God, it really flies. I mean, it's a properly quick thing, this. And when you do really crack open the throttles, that's when the thunder arrives. That's when the soundtrack really kicks in. The rest of the time, the engine is much more subdued. Obviously, it being a Mercedes AMG unit, it's very flexible, it's very easy to drive, it's not taxing in any sense. It's not one of those old-fashioned thoroughbred engines that's difficult or awkward in any way. It's very good. In terms of suspension, it's a very, very comfortable car. It has multiple adjustable dampers, so those change according to the driving modes, which you select with the click wheel here on the dash. The best setup is probably to have everything in sport except for the dampers, at which point this DB12 Volante does have a very cunning combination of poise and yet comfort also. Because it's got big wheels and big tyres, and because these are quite choppy and often poorly made roads, yeah, you will get a bit of fidget, you will get a bit of wheel patter, you will get a bit of, you'll feel things moving around from time to time. But that's actually not all the time. And certainly when the road opens out and gets a little bit bigger and smoother, the DB12 really comes into its own. One of the most surprising aspects is that the steering, this is not surprising, the steering is really well weighted and very communicative and very nice to use, and chats plenty about what the front wheels are up to and how much grip you have, etc. What's really surprising is just how light that nose is. I mean, for a big, long-nosed front-engine car, I mean, technically this is almost a mid-engine car because the engine is sat so far back in the chassis that it's pretty much here behind the screen. But what is really surprising is just how light and delicate that nose is as you turn into a series of challenging corners. It's not a sports car. I mean, Aston has come up with this phrase of super tourer, which suggests that, or at least tries to imply that it's got supercar performance in a Grand Touring package. That's kind of true, but it definitely feels more GT than supercar, more GT than sports car. Although with little hints, little flavours, little touches coming through of all of those things from time to time. It is a very accomplished and very capable car. I think what'll be interesting to see is all of this stuff here inside the cabin now is pretty much bespoke Aston Martin. Yes, there are Mercedes bits and pieces in the background, but pretty much everything you touch and feel is properly home-brewed, homemade Aston Martin now. So it'll be interesting to see how well that lasts, what the quality in terms of long-term quality is like. This roof is fantastic. It's keeping the noise out beautifully now that it's up. I mean, you really could, step past the DB12 Coupe and get this and have a true multi-role, multi-season car, because there's no penalty. Aside from the 90 kilogram weight penalty, there's no penalty in terms of having this roof versus the tin roof on the Coupe. Even the structure is very nearly as stiff, in spite of the fact that the roof is missing. Aston Martin has said it hasn't had to add any extra structural work under the skin to keep the car stiff. It's just changed the rear suspension rates a little bit. to maintain that sort of same feeling you get in the coupe. And I'll well believe it. There doesn't seem to be any scuttle shake. The whole car feels very, very solid and beautifully poised on the road. So yes, it's expensive. You're not going to see very many of them. It's it's a rich person's plaything. But as far as rich person's playthings go, it's pretty bloody lovely.